Hello everyone, how you doing? And welcome back to Skye and Evan in the morning. And today we're talking about a Bond movie. Today we're talking about GoldenEye, starring Pierce Brosnan.
Yes, indeed. Yet another one that neither of us had seen,
Mm-hmm.
like rolling the dice on what we think of it, and obviously first Bond movie. So
Yeah,
I want to start with you, Sky, because like this is my recommendation,
yeah.
just out of the gate. You haven't watched much Bond. What did you think?
I did not like it, and I think,
Didn't like it, yeah.
yeah, I think it's the kind of thing where I just don't care about the Bond formula.
Well, it's funny. I figured that would be Bond is interesting in that regard, where he is very formulaic. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's a bit like Sherlock Holmes. You know, there are characters that are cliched and formulaic. You know exactly what you're getting into when you go into the story, and Bond is one of those. You know, you're going to get like a secret mission, probably like an opening with like a lot of action. He's going to be a player. There's going to be a Bond girl, maybe a
Mm-hmm.
Bond villain, usually like a greater villain, like who's the mastermind, and then a henchman. They're all kind of the same movie, but
Yeah,
it's
that is what I mean. Like, I knew what was going to happen at every point of the way, every part of the way through the movie. It was like I knew what was going to happen. I was never surprised. The movie was very long. It was not that too long. It was like 2 hours and 20
I did.
minutes. I was just like, oh my god, can we
Yeah.
get this over?
It's
There
a,
was a moment where I was like, oh my god, this is the last scene, right? There's like 50 minutes left when they were in the fucking train. Like, okay.
I think they did a decent job pacing it. Like it was a tad on the long side, especially considering
It,
like how it's
yeah.
structured and with the villain.
I
But
don't I
I,
don't know if it's a problem with pacing or just a problem of me not caring because I was just
yeah,
not invested at all because I knew every single beat of the story and like it didn't do anything interesting to like keep me hooked despite the cliches because we talked about like something like K-pop Demon Hunters which is like extremely
yeah,
cliche, but I really like that movie because it has a lot of things about it that still keep me invested in the movie despite the cliches. This one didn't. It felt exactly what I expected. There was like one scene which was M talking to Bond saying like, you're
that
misogynistic and sexist and everything, but I don't want you to die. I'm not gonna send you to die. I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. Like that was like a cool moment, and I thought, oh, it's gonna be
well,
about Bond learning like the new ways because it's fucking modernizing it. But then they didn't. Like M never comes
well,
back into the movie, so
that's actually something that's really interesting. I did laugh at that. Like there was like almost no wrap up. It's just like, oh, that's it. I'm like, it's
yeah,
mission accomplished,
he
right? I'm like,
killed the
yeah,
villain.
but
It's
I'm
like
like,
okay.
little bit of like a time. Like, okay. But that's what's interesting. I did not appreciate that M. I thought it was in the later Brosnan movies that they recast M as Judy Dench. And I've always loved Dem as or Judy Dench as M
Mm-hmm.
for Bond. She did so well in the Craig movies and has like such an interesting arc. And I think it's just a brilliant reinvention of the character because a lot of people talk about gender swapping characters, usually
Uh-huh.
negatively, but I'm like, I think it's an ingenious example of one where like
Yeah, I think
she's in
it's
a
an
position
interesting
above
thing of
him
like,
and
I think it's interesting because they have a thing of like the world changing and Bond being this like that one scene they have like it's the one scene where I was like, oh my god, the movie's doing something interesting. Like the one scene where my brain lit up, I was like, oh my god, character. Because the rest was so formulaic. The rest was like Bond getting with the girl and being horny as fuck. I will say, what was her name? Lexia,
Natalia, I believe.
whatever. No, the fucking Russian girl who
Oh,
was like horny all the time. She
yeah.
was unhinged. I loved her so much.
So
She
and it's
she was like so into like getting hurt as like sexual pleasure. It made that fight scene where she was like kissing Bond and biting him and everything so fucking fun. She was like the
there are
only
like
part of the movie
fight
I was like, oh my god, she's so fun.
well, it's so funny that I was laughing at just how over the top they went. There are sex scenes where it seems like she's trying to kill them. It's like the
I mean, that was the point. She was killing them while having sex because she just like took pleasure
yeah.
from it, and it was part of the job that she had to kill him. It's great. It's great. And the scene where does it with
She
Bond is fucking amazing. Because Bond fucking kisses her, and then they struggle for a gun, and then they start kissing again, and she starts fucking suffocating him with her thighs. It's so
it,
unhinged. I wish she was a bigger part of the movie. They didn't make her like the main villain because obviously they wanted to make Alec. But honestly, if she was the main villain, she would have been so much fun. I would have probably liked the
well,
movie more.
well, and also like Arcady also like kind of takes the villain role because like Alex gone for like the
Most
first
part
half
of the
of the
movie, yeah.
movie, and I remember it was like 50 minutes or so that he comes back, and like they make decent use of him. But I was like, dude, I know you got to fake out the villain death, but come on, like it's Sean Bean. So
Yeah. I don't
the
know.
thing about this movie is that Martin Campbell directed Casino Royale and this, and what I think this was, I haven't seen any of the Timothy Dalton Bond movies, but from what I've heard, people said that that was like too dark of a Bond. They didn't like how Bond acted, and like Roger Moore was seen as more goofy. I feel like this was like a middle ground. It was somewhat grounded, but there's
Mhm.
still Bond gadgets. There's
Yeah.
still the same general formula. Craig is where
It is
you
super
get into the
grounded.
and revisioning for Bond and
Yeah.
changing his character, altering the like player elements, like giving a little bit more
Giving
of a
him. Yeah.
backstory, making the female characters more interesting. This movie, he doesn't, and that's the thing about Bond. Like Bond doesn't really learn, right? I'm like,
Hmm.
not really. Same way that Sherlock Holmes doesn't really learn, right? Like Sherlock Holmes kind of stays the same. It's
Yeah.
like, well, we
But
love him
yeah,
anyway,
there
right?
were.
Sort of, but it's like,
Yeah. I mean, there were hints
but
of like interesting stuff with Bond. The thing is, right? If you're making a Bond movie and you're following all the cliches, um, and if the action doesn't grip me, which it just. I did not care too much for it when he got into the fucking tank. I was like, oh, of course he's gonna get in the fucking tank. It's I don't know. It didn't
oh
wow
my
me. I
god,
know
that
you loved
scene.
that, but because I saw your review, but I was just like, oh, he's in the tank now. Okay.
I
But
oh my god, there's I so for what I'd not spoiled this movie for myself. I every time I'd seen a Martin Campbell movie blind, I was rewarded, and I went out of my way to avoid spoilers. And when that scene happened, there is a chase with the tank, and it is the most amazing
yeah.
thing. It's so goofy and implausible, but I couldn't get
Yeah,
enough
the
of that.
tank is so fucking fast. Tanks are not that fast. It was
Yeah,
faster than
in
the car. It was
cars,
so funny.
how does it keep up? It's like
It
whatever.
fucking drifts and everything. It was funny. But
Yeah.
anyway, it's like I expected at least to do something interesting because I assume when you're using cliches, you're using it like as like a shorthand to like do something interesting with the characters. Like the story is cliched, but the characters around it have depth, and they hint at it sometimes with Bond saying like, "Oh, we're running from." Like he says like, "Oh, I'm always running. It's the only way I know how to keep going," or something like that. And how Alec tells him that oh, getting with all the girls just to make you forget about the ones you didn't save. It's like all of those are interesting,
Well,
but it never like feels like a character arc or a character like actual character from Bond. It feels like lip service.
Well, that's the other interesting thing is that Bond is very flirtatious and distant, and the romance elements with Natalia, I did not buy it at all, and
Mm,
I thought it was all but inappropriate because I
it was
you haven't
very
seen you haven't seen Quantum of Solace, right?
no.
That movie might have my favorite Bond girl because she is like all but using Bond in that
Mm,
movie. Both Bond and her are out for revenge, and basically the movie is they're both trying to get their man, and they do in the end. And there's not a romantic hint. There's nothing like that. They just basically team up in the movie. And this is the thing about the Bond girl cliche. It's just like it's the person that Bond sleeps with like halfway through the movie. Usually they're like with the villain, and they're like usually they become more heroic when they sleep with Bond. And it's a weird cliche. And I'm not saying it can't never work, but it is. What I find weird about Natalia with that is that she was a character before. It's a really interesting premise.
well, I
She like
liked her, but
escapes
then
a
she just becomes
massacre.
generic Bond girl.
Yeah, you have this moment where they could have done something interesting where she's the one survivor of this massacre they're trying to cover up. And I was like, oh shit, Bond's going to be looking for her,
Mm.
and the villains are going to be looking for her, and she's not going to trust anybody. And it could be one of those interesting things where you're like trying to keep the witness alive, trying to get it so that like they get the word out, but it doesn't. It's like you said, once she meets Bond, then she just becomes a generic Bond girl, and it's unfortunate because they were doing stuff that was more interesting with her before, but then like other than the computer stuff at the end, it's
Yeah.
just she's just
I
the love
think it's the
interest.
thing, right? Because like I was saying, like you usually use cliches to do something interesting, like around it with the characters. I think this movie did the opposite, where it had interesting things it wanted to say, but it was forced to like fall back into the cliches, and that's why I didn't vibe with it. Because every time it hinted at something interesting, it just went back to being cliched and boring, at least boring
Yeah,
for
well,
me.
maybe it could be like the action inclination of this movie. Honestly, it is. I think they do a decent enough job with balancing characters, but this is a 90s thriller, you know. You got to have like an action scene in every other. And another interesting part of this movie, I haven't played it, but the NES 60 or the N64 version of GoldenEye, there's a video game called
Yeah, I've
GoldenEye
heard
that I've
that
heard
game is
people
great.
love.
Yeah.
That's like a classic first person shooter, and the movie itself is structured that way. I don't know how, like to a T, it feels like the video game, but you know, there's a tank level. There's like an opening, like bungee jump and infiltration with like Russian agents and like you shooting your way through.
Yeah,
And
I've seen a
it,
video of the
it's
GoldenEye game. It is very interesting. I've heard it's really great, so it might be
yeah,
one that's fun playing.
I want to play it. A lot of people love it, and it's an important part of like understanding this movie and like its wider fandom because there's a whole fandom around that game. So, but the movie itself, it definitely, like you were saying, it's almost like it was contractually like obligated to lean into that like more Roger Moore era of
Mm,
Bond, where
yeah. I
where
think
there's
it's
just
the kind
more
of
action and
thing
more going
where
on.
like if you like the Bond formula, this is right up people's alley. But if you don't, then there's not much you're gonna get out of it. Which I don't care about the Bond formula. Like, I don't know. I really like Casino Royale. I think it's a really good movie. But that was like the first Bond film I ever watched. So it's the kind of thing like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, it's not a great
from what
introduction because
I
it's not Bond. It's a
no
deconstruction of
from
Bond.
yeah, from what I understand, the rest of the movies are do
Yeah.
not like it's the exception to the rule, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, the
And
Daniel Craig
what I
thing is all like deconstructing Bond. So it's obviously very different.
well, it's what I find funny about Bond, and this ties into the wider Bond discussion. But it's funny that the attempts to deconstruct Bond, like I think they hit stride in Skyfall. Skyfall works enough because it's more about like Bond growing older as a person, but it still feels like classic action oriented, plot driven, while still doing solid character service and Deakins did the cinematography. But then they did the weird kid thing in the sequels. I don't think you've seen
No.
No Time to Die or Spectre in full, but they just didn't really know how to keep it going. They didn't know how to make like a Bond deconstruction Bond. It just didn't really work out. And when they kept going, they would often just make movies that just felt kind of like the old Bond movies. And
Mm.
at that point, it's like, should Bond be formulaic? I'm like, well, Amazon seemingly has bought up Bond, so we'll see what they do with it and see what maybe TV. I I'm not optimistic for the future of Bond, but I do think there is something to be said for the Bond formula because like
Uh, I don't
I've
know.
seen I've seen worse Bond movies than this that follow the same formulas. Do you not think like because I'm with you that a lot of the innuendo like and the like flirtatious dialogue is not aged great. Some of the action is really ridiculous, but I do one thing about this movie, I think it's really well shot.
Hmm.
It looks great. I love the lighting on like the faces. Like there's this really people would call it unrealistic now, but in like dark rooms where there's like a clear block of light on like a
Yeah.
character's face. They do that whole like out of the shadows thing when they introduce Alec. He's got his like face illuminated and like just like covered in shadow, and then he walks out into the light. It's like, oh, that was amazing. I really good looking movie, like
Yeah. I
exceptionally
agree.
put together.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's just a thing of like, if you the Bond formula or just the idea of Bond feels outdated, and like they tried to modernize it with Craig, and I don't know where they can go from there. You know, like I
Well,
think because like if you want to go from there, are you gonna deconstruct the deconstruction, or are you gonna get back to the formula? And it's like a lot of people said, like casting a female Bond and like doing
yeah, or
different things.
black. I mean,
Yeah, like to
uh,
do something interesting. And I get it, but I don't know. I feel like I don't care about Bond. I feel like what I realized watching this movie is that I don't like James Bond as a
well,
franchise.
that's a question that I've asked a decent bit. Is like, have we like has the world outgrown Bond?
That's what I
There's
feel
just like
like.
enough time because I'm like, what is Bond? It's a like male fantasy surrounding post Cold War like Europe basically. Like it's this fantasy British spy with these gadgets, and he like always defeats the bad guys and is like keeping the world safe in the Cold War. It's like Cold War's over, modern context, like different views on women and society as whole. It's different stories that are popular and being told. It's like, is has Bond just had its time and it's done? I'm like,
I
I
think
don't
so.
want to believe that because I'm like, I feel like you could recast someone that would breathe life. It's like the Doctor, right? I'm like, Doctor
But the
Who's
Doctor
not
Who
like
is a
gonna
lot
die, but
different. Like the formula of Doctor Who lends itself to reinventing itself
yeah,
a lot more. The formula of Bond is inherently outdated because it is about concerns regarding, like you said, the Cold War and a male power fantasy that I think people have grown to realize is just very problematic. And like, I did not care for it. I did not care at all about the way they showed women in this movie, and they show Bond as this like suave guy who everyone swoons over. Like the fucking scene with Moneypenny, where it's like, oh, this would qualify as sexual harassment, and then he's like,
that's
oh,
just
what
straight
does
up.
that mean? And like, oh, it means someday you're gonna make good in your promise. Like, what? You just said sexual harassment. Are you what? You know what I mean? Like it just
What?
feels like the type of dialogue that if you heard today, it'd be like, this is insane.
Well, that's the thing. From what I understand, Moneypenny's always like that. It's the Bond cliche. It's like that's just the way it was. But that kind of thing is genuinely
It's
problematic in a
yeah,
modern context, and it can be criticized. But if Bond doesn't learn his lessons and he doesn't
yeah,
change in a substantive way, and it's like I feel like they did that to a decent degree in Casino Royale. But like I was saying, there's only you can't really make a character based on deconstruction because at that point you just take away everything, right? At some
yeah,
point, like it. So I don't
yeah.
know.
It's I don't know. It's just this has become a discussion about Bond in general. But I genuinely, I feel like the world doesn't need Bond anymore, and I think it's I have no clue how Amazon is gonna make anything interesting out of it after the Craig movies that at least try to like do something different and like actually try to understand Bond as a
Yeah. I,
character, because at least in GoldenEye I've not seen other Bond movies. The only ones I've seen are now are GoldenEye, Casino Royale, and Skyfall. And I watched Skyfall when it came out, so it's like what, 9. um like
yeah.
I don't think, I don't know. I just don't think there's these. I don't think GoldenEye does anything for Bond's character. I think he's just like a vehicle for the male power fantasy, and he's just there. And you're supposed to, like, as a man, be like, "Oh hell yeah, that's me right there fighting crime."
Yeah. Not really. I do think that like Brosnan is just kind of because I like his performance. I think this is the first Brosnan movie that I'd seen, but character wise, like he doesn't like I was saying, I don't feel like he learns anything or
Mm-hmm.
changes in a way that's interesting by the end of the movie. He kind of stays the same, and he's just kind of one of those characters that usually does. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's like it's a fine enough movie, but it's like it doesn't do anything like wrong per se, like other than like not fully lean into the ideas that it hints at. But it's also like I just don't care for it. It's just not my vibe. I guess I just don't like Bond.
yeah. Honestly, part of it for me is just how entertaining I find the action. Like,
Hmm.
so the opening bungee jump, and I have it on screen now, but the plane when he motorcycles off the cliff. And like when the plane runs out of runway and free falls into it, and like the cliff goes on and he somehow manages to pull up. I'm like, that scene. Sometimes this movie just goes so wild and so Bond that I was just in for the ride. I think you were hoping for something a little more character oriented,
Yeah.
whereas I
I don't
just
know. It's like it felt very 90s action in the sense of like, yeah, all they're
yeah
doing is very well done for the like the standard of the 90s, especially because of how little computer generated stuff there is. But it
yeah
didn't wow me. Like, it isn't like it's not fucking aliens or something. I don't know. It's just not something that's very interesting for me.
Yeah. Another thing I want to note, by the way, lots of really solid practical effects
Oh
and
yeah, for
stunts,
sure.
like you were
The
saying. It was
fucking
just back in
explosion
the
with the
day where,
satellite and everything, that looked insane. The fucking like helicopter hit, not helicopter, the fucking fighter jet hitting the satellite and exploding. I was like, Jesus Christ, did they actually blow up a fucking? I don't know how they did it. If it was miniatures or something. It looked great.
well, in the entire third act, that was one of the few things that I knew about, but I'm guessing a lot of it was miniatures with
Uh
like
huh.
what they filled with water, but that whole set that they build, there was clearly some of that like people were like actually walking around on. Like it is really impressive. Like
Yeah.
not like even the effects when the Alex like dropped, it's just that thing of like it so many more of the effects are timeless because they just don't use green screen or CGI or anything like that. And the effects you can tell like they're not real, but they're timeless just because
Yeah.
they were a product of their time rather than using CGI and dating themselves. So a lot of 90s movies do that sometimes, just
Yeah.
leaned a little too hard into CGI. You're like, oh, like
Yeah, I mean, it's
that
what I
is
feel with
rough.
like the thing where it's just like you can tell it's fake, but you're fully immersed because it's how this entire world looks, and it doesn't like try to look realistic. It tries to look, a certain specific way to give you the vibe of the movie, which is like
Well, and we
and the
talked
Lost
about that
Star
with
with
the
fucking
the prequel. Like
yeah,
they put CGI over it, and it kind of like doesn't look as
yeah,
good. It just looks dated. You're not as drawn in.
yeah,
There isn't as much a sense of tangibility. So
yeah. There is a thing to be said about like looking real and looking like immersive. Like there's a difference between like a movie being realistic and like the concept of like verisimilitude, where you just buy into the own universe of like how things are done within that universe, and that's how you get immersed instead of like something trying to replicate the real world, which then pulls you out because you're like, well, you're trying to be. It's my whole thing with like Ant-Man, where they try to like make the fucking superpowers be explained, like the fucking, oh, he increases density and everything. Like, yeah, if you follow the logic that the movie explains, it makes absolutely no sense. If you hadn't explained anything, I would have been completely fine with it. Like there's a thing of like movies that try to feel realistic versus movies that just like immerse you in their own experience, and I don't know, something interesting to be said about that.
yeah,
But yeah, would you recommend GoldenEye? I assume so.
I I would. We always like discourage like number ratings, but I gave this a 7, and I think it's a pretty fair rating. This like it didn't quite wow me either, but I was definitely more in for it for the ride. And if you've seen Bond, you probably know what you're going for. I'm glad I didn't spoil this movie for myself. I was impressed, but I definitely prefer Casino Royale and other Craig Bond movies to this.
Hmm.
And I what we talked about with Bond, like on a wider level, is interesting. We might cover Bond, like different Bond movies in the
Yeah,
future, but I I do think the conversation about Bond just as a character and as a facet of culture is an interesting conversation to be had.
yeah. It is
Would you
interesting because
not
he has
recommend this
evolved.
movie?
Well, I'll get to that. But it is interesting because he has evolved kind of like Doctor Who has, like over times. I don't know. I think it was 62, right? The first Bond movie or something. It was very early on.
Yeah,
And it was
60s for sure. Yeah.
yeah, and Doctor Who started in 63, both still going with a bunch of different versions of the characters. It's very interesting. Um and they're both
And both
British.
kind of in rocky waters trying to reinvent themselves
Yeah.
and figure it out because they're both kind of in a rocky position right now. So
Yeah, it's very interesting. There's a facet of British culture and how that translates to the rest of the world. It's very interesting. And there is like I think Bond will never like fully evolve as a character, like do something interesting, because there's still like the people that, like the racists who, or the like the right wing racists who are all like, we need like Bond back, where he's a womanizer and everything, and he needs, because we need good role models, male role models. Like I've seen so much of that shit, that it's just like, it gets to a point where like I don't think we are ever going to be allowed for Bond to evolve, even though they tried with Daniel Craig. Like, people were really not receptive, especially to his death in No Time to Die and everything. So, I don't know. I feel like I will. You may recommend another Bond movie, and I'll gladly watch it. But I don't think I ever will recommend a Bond movie for the podcast, because I genuinely don't think I like the vibe. And yeah, I think that's my take. I do not care for Bond. I don't want to say I don't recommend it, because like, for my own experience I don't. But it's like, I know that a lot of people are into this, into the vibe of Bond and the formula. It's like you said with Sherlock Holmes, but then again, Sherlock Holmes is much more interesting. I think, as a character, even though it is formulaic.
Yeah, I haven't read Fleming's books. I want to read at least one of his books. I'd be curious to see how he is as like an author, but I do agree with that. Like, I think Sherlock Holmes is a more interesting character than Bond is. So.
Yeah, and I mean, Sherlock is always like called out for being an asshole. You know what I mean? Bond is like this movie tries to call him out for being a sexist, misogynist pig, and then it just drops it. So he's like, okay, thanks.
He's too cool. That's the thing about Bond. He's too cool to be critical. Like, 'cause he's always winning, isn't he?
Well, yeah, it's like I always expect there to be like something, like for the other shoe to drop. Like Bond somehow is one up, so, and then he needs to like, I don't know, do something to earn the win, after like just like coasting by throughout the movie. But he doesn't. He just continues coasting, and he wins very casually. I think it's part of the thing with me for this movie. It's just all super casual. It never seems like Bond is in any actual threat.
Well, like you said, that one scene with M, that's the one key character scene where he's challenged and where they do something interesting. And this is the thing about Casino Royale, like spoilers, like for Casino Royale indirectly, but in that movie, the opening action sequence, like Bond fucks up and he ends up killing a guy that he was supposed to take in for pettiness, basically. And M calls him out for it. It's like, what the fuck? Like, you violated the one like unviolatable thing internationally, so you could kill a nobody, and it's great. That is more critical of Bond, but like the movie as a whole, just Bond is meant to be cool, and when you make him cool, you get movies like this that are like entertaining, but you don't learn too much about the character. So
it's exactly. I think it's the thing, like, if you like cool 90s action, if you like Pierce Brosnan, you're probably gonna enjoy this film. But in terms of like looking for anything interesting character wise, there's genuinely like almost nothing there. Some hints that never get developed, or like, just developed is a good way to put it. So yeah, I don't know. I personally wouldn't recommend it, but I understand why people like it. It's just not my vibe, I guess. Yeah. All right. Time for me to recommend something.
Yes, indeed. What do you have?
So, Evan, I was thinking about this movie last night. I don't know why. While I was watching GoldenEye, I was thinking about. I forgot why. Okay. Anyway, I'm gonna recommend a Brazilian movie, because I've been wanting to recommend more Brazilian movies, because I'm Brazilian. And I'm gonna recommend a classic that you may have seen. I don't think so, but it might be. City of God.
Oh my God. That is Brazil. Yeah.
It is Brazilian.
I've met
arguably
that for years.
Arguably one of the best movies of all time, a lot of people say. And I've never seen it.
That is one that makes a lot of people's top 10.
Yeah.
And them, like 8.5 or like Metropolis. It's like, there's that one where you see it in like a bunch of lists. You're like, yeah, people always put that on their list. City of God is one that people really say is a great film. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And despite me being Brazilian, I never watched it. So yeah.
Oh, you're going in blind too.
I am going in blind too.
Interesting. Wow. That's just been on my list, and just one that I just never prioritized. Let's fucking
Same.
go.
So yeah, I was like, okay, let's do something about let's do like a Brazilian movie. So yeah, I'm excited for that. And yeah, I think that's all for today, folks. That was our discussion of GoldenEye. I'm sorry if I offended any Bond fans. Okay, I don't mean it. It's just I didn't. Yeah, I can't help it. Okay, I like movies that I like. I can't force myself to like things I don't. But we will catch you next time for City of God. It should be a very interesting watch. And yeah, catch you next week, folks. Bye bye.
Bye bye.